Around the world, millions of people weld, cut, and braze at work. Every year, people die in on-the-job accidents. Many workers suffer eye burns or other injuries, ranging from toxic exposures to electric shocks to falls. Plus, hot work operations start 7% of all industrial fires. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and other groups set standards for equipment and safety. But all the written standards in the world can't keep you safe unless you follow safe work practices. Hot work safety can be complicated. The major processes are arc welding, oxy-fuel gas welding, brazing, and thermal cutting. There are special safety concerns for each process. Arc welding is the most common. In arc welding, heat is created as electricity flows across a gap between the tip of the welding electrode and the metal. The process melts the electrode to form a molten puddle in the base metal. Because the base metal also melts at the joining surfaces, the pieces bond when they cool. Oxy-fuel gas welding, the second major type, uses heat from burning gases to melt and join the base metal. Metal rods, similar to those used in arc welding, are used where filler is needed. The most common type of oxy-fuel gas welding uses oxygen and acetylene. However, other gases like AMP, propane, or natural gas may be used with oxygen to generate the heat required. Brazing involves heating metals and joining them with a molten filler material at temperatures exceeding 840 degrees Fahrenheit. Soldering is similar to brazing, but uses materials that melt at lower temperatures. In brazing, the filler material may be wire, foil and fillings, slugs, powder, paste, or tape. Fluxes, a variety of substances that prevent oxygen from interfering with the bond, must be used unless the process is performed in a vacuum. Thermal cutting is the last major hot work process. It involves cutting metals by melting them. Oxygen cutting or arc cutting are most commonly used, depending on the metal being cut. Some welding and cutting use robots, lasers, or electron beams. You'll even find various types of solid-state operations, like forge or friction welding. But regardless of the process, hot work carries big responsibilities. Not only must you get the job done and protect yourself under hot and difficult conditions, you also have to protect the people, places, and things around you. When you do hot work, your responsibilities fall into 4 areas: pre-planning, personal safety, work area safety, and equipment safety. Welding and cutting operations involve heat. Temperatures as high as 27,000 degrees Fahrenheit can be hazardous to you, your co-workers, and your workplace. No two jobs are alike. The hazards change every time the material or location changes. Pre-planning is the most important step in any job. To be sure you're safe, work with your supervisor to analyze each job for hazards, and then take steps to control or eliminate them. In fact, many facilities have an inspection and written permit system that spells out required protective equipment and safety precautions before any hot work can begin. And in some situations, like hot work on process systems that hold hazardous chemicals or in confined spaces, you need a written permit. Closely related to pre-planning is assuring your personal safety. Hot work can expose you to a variety of hazards, ranging from toxic substances to noise and light. One major hazard comes from fumes and particles that enter the air from the melting metals and fluxes. The substances released depend on the base and filler materials and the fluxes used. These hazards vary from job to job. You could be exposed to aluminum, beryllium, cadmium, chromium, fluorides, iron, lead, manganese, nickel, silica, titanium, or zinc. Overexposure can cause a variety of health effects, including breathing problems, eye irritation, or even cancer. Lead is a special hazard. It can be released as lead fume from preservative coating and lead-based paint during cutting and welding operations. Brief, high exposures, as well as smaller continuing exposures, are dangerous. Hot work can also expose you to gases like carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, or ozone, and to various decomposition products of solvents and cleaners. Ask your supervisor what kinds of materials you'll be working with. Find out what kinds of gases or fumes these materials could release when you're welding. Ask about the symptoms of exposure to hazardous fumes and what steps to take for early treatment. Other hazards come from heat, light, radiation, noise, and electricity. Because hot work poses so many hazards, you and your employer must work together to make sure you stay safe. This is done in two ways: by using engineering controls like special construction, ventilation, and exhaust systems, and by wearing personal protective equipment called PPE. Whenever possible, do hot work in designated areas where engineering controls like exhaust systems and non-reflective, non-flammable surfaces are in place. When this is not possible, provide added ventilation and take special precautions to prevent light, heat, and fumes from creating hazards to you, your co-workers, and the work area. Once engineering controls reduce hazards as much as possible, you must use personal protective equipment to create a barrier between you and the hazard. The exact items you'll need to wear depend on the hazards found when planning the job. That's why pre-planning is so important. The general types of PPE you may need are protective clothing, eye, face, and head protection, respiratory protection, and hearing protection. Protective clothing includes fire-resistant gloves and shirts to protect you from heat, ultraviolet radiation, and sparks. You may need to wear fire-resistant aprons, coveralls, and leggings, or boots, plus shoulder and ear covers when doing overhead work. You could need rubber-soled shoes, non-conductive gloves, or special floor mats to guard against electrical shock. Always wear pants without cuffs and keep pockets empty and sealed to keep sparks from settling there. Leather or wool is better than cotton unless the fabric is treated with special fire retardant. Don't wear synthetics like polyester or nylon because they'll melt onto your skin when exposed to heat or sparks. Eye, face, and head protection is another type of PPE and must be used every time by everyone exposed to welding and cutting operations. You can suffer serious skin and eye burns or even become blind if you don't wear the proper protection. The correct type of protection depends on the job. Your supervisor will tell you what you need when you plan the job. It is important to wear safety glasses with a welding helmet, especially if flying debris is present. The color of lenses or filter plates used for eye and skin protection depends on the work you're doing and the process used. Unless you wear the right shade number, your eyes and skin could be burned or you could lose your sight. You could suffer welder's flash, arc eye, photokeratitis, conjunctivitis, or even cataracts. Some of these conditions show up immediately, while others take time to develop. Remember, wear your eye, face, and head protection every time you do hot work. Inspect it for damage and clean it before each use. Many people are surprised to learn they must wear respiratory protection when performing some welding and cutting operations. Although employers try to reduce exposure to fumes and gases with engineering controls like ventilation, sometimes the contaminants in your breathing zone are still too high. In such cases, you will need to wear a respirator or other type of device to make sure the air you breathe is safe. When toxic substances like lead or mercury are present, you'll need local exhaust ventilation or will have to wear an airline respirator to provide breathable air. In confined spaces where welding operations consume oxygen and fumes collect, you may need to wear a self-contained breathing apparatus or a supplied air respirator that provides fresh air from outside the confined space. Hot work in a confined space is very dangerous and requires a detailed written permit. Never work in a confined space until a hot work permit is issued and all safety precautions listed are in place. Selecting the proper respirator is a complex process. It depends on the work situation and the types and levels of contaminants that are present in your breathing zone. During the pre-planning stage, your supervisor will select the correct respirator for the job you're doing. You'll also be fit tested and trained to wear it properly. You must wear it every time you're doing that job. You will need to learn how to tell when the cartridges should be changed. If you have any problem with the respirator, like difficulty breathing, notify your supervisor immediately. Hearing protection is the last kind of PPE you may need to use. Your supervisor will measure the noise level and tell you if hearing protection is necessary. For example, arc cutting and grinding operations often create enough noise to require hearing protection. Up to now, we have focused on personal safety for people doing welding and cutting operations. You need to work with your supervisor to assess the job and choose the proper safety equipment. But the responsibility does not fall only on your supervisor. You need to learn all you can about the materials you use and the operations you perform. Ask questions and check the material safety data sheets to learn about the hazards of the materials you're using. Understand manufacturer's instructions, labels, and warnings on equipment before you use it. Learn the standard operating procedures for the job you're doing and know how to summon help if something goes wrong. You may not use this information every day, but knowing it helps you do your job better and more safely. After you've planned the job and arranged for your personal safety, your next responsibility is to make the work area safe. Experienced cutters and welders know that sparks and spatter can fly up to 35 feet from the operation in all directions. Some people call this the hazard zone, the area where heat, light, and sparks can cause fires and burns. In fact, OSHA requires shielding, or clearing the work area of combustible and flammable materials for 35 feet in all directions before beginning cutting or welding operations. In addition, at least one fire watcher must be posted during hot work if a fire could start, and must stay for at least 30 minutes after the work is done. The fire watcher must be ready to put out any fire with water, sand, or a fire extinguisher, and be trained to summon help. Before you perform hot work, check to see where heat and sparks could travel. Floorboards, machinery, doorways, walls, pipes, or ductwork must be protected. Move materials that could burn to at least 35 feet from where you'll be working. If the flooring is combustible, wet it down or protect it. Cover air intakes and shut down ventilation systems that could draw in heat, fumes, or sparks and spread them through the facility. Check the back sides of walls for fire hazards. Remember, make the work area fire safe before you begin cutting or welding operations. Shield your work zone to keep co-workers from being injured. Keep everyone far away from your flash, sparks, and heat, or insist they wear protective gear. And never begin welding operations when unprotected people are present. They may not understand the hazards involved, so the responsibility for protecting them falls on you. Another part of work area safety involves good housekeeping. Keep your welding equipment, cables, and hoses away from passageways, ladders, and stairways. This will help prevent falls and injuries to co-workers and damage to the equipment. Put butts in butt cans and pick up tools and waste materials as you go. You don't want anyone to be injured by a mess you've left behind. Some jobs require special precautions. Discuss these with your supervisor during the pre-planning stage. For example, you should never weld or cut a drum, pipe, or vessel unless it is absolutely clean of hazardous materials that could explode or create harmful vapors. And remember that paints and coatings on metal often contain lead, which is released quickly into your breathing zone during hot work. Using a longer barrel on your cutting torch can help reduce lead fumes, but you may still need to wear a respirator, so check before welding or cutting on coated metals. Be sure to vent or purge all hollow spaces, cavities, or containers so that air and gases can escape before you apply heat. Fall protection like railings, harnesses, lifelines, or other safeguards will be necessary if you're working above ground. Be aware of what's below you and secure your equipment so it won't fall. Remember that hot work in areas like tanks, boilers, and compartments is very dangerous and must follow special confined space requirements. Your supervisor can help you learn the best way to do each job, but the final responsibility for work area safety rests with you. It's important to plan everything before you begin. Your fourth area of responsibility is equipment safety. You should be familiar with equipment you will be using and know the proper way to use and maintain it. Manufacturers' instructions and operating procedures provide information on equipment safety. Read the information and ask your supervisor whenever you have questions or concerns. When planning any job, inspect the equipment for leaks, damage, faulty valves, or regulator problems before you begin work. In arc welding, inspect electrical equipment and wires. Never overload a circuit. Each welding box should have a circuit of its own because of the power it demands. Never override breakers, fuses, guards, automatic shutoffs, or other safety features. Don't use faulty equipment. Tag equipment that isn't working well or is damaged so no one else uses it until it's fixed. Some companies use a lockout device to secure equipment when it's not in use. In oxyfuel welding and cutting, pay attention to cylinder markings and labels. Remember, it's against the law to remove or change them. These gases are under pressure, so you must handle the cylinders carefully to prevent fires, explosions, or other lethal consequences. Cap all cylinders and protect them from being dropped, struck, damaged, or upended. Chain or secure them while in use and in storage so they won't fall or roll. Always move cylinders on a welding cart so they can be properly secured, and never roll them on their sides. In storage, follow the precautions listed on the MSDS and on the container. For example, oxygen must be stored away from acetylene to cut down on the risk of fire. Before you begin any job, check all fittings, regulators, and hoses for damage, and report faulty equipment so it can be repaired or replaced. While you work, keep your equipment safe. Protect it from heat and traffic. Keep it away from combustibles and free of oil and grease. After all, if you take care of your equipment, it will take care of you. Be a partner in safety. You know you share the responsibility for working safe and working smart. Share it with your supervisor, your coworkers, and your employer. That's why you learn all you can about your job. Ask questions about your job and how to make your work safer. That's part of learning the job and a part of protecting all the people, places, and things around you.